Good evening again. I'm Brendan Sullivan. I'm the EVP of Global Technology and Operations at Vubiquity. And I will be talking tonight about the evolution of cloud technology and how it's really transforming both VOD and then onto electronic sell-through. Now, when I was first asked to speak here, our marketing department put together a synopsis, and they had a play on the film Cloudless. I've since had the opportunity to rent that movie not once but twice. And the only thing I now know for sure is that the only thing more confusing than the pace of innovation in our industry is the plot of that movie. So do not expect a lot of great movie critiques from me in this session. I do, however, like this quote from the movie. Fantasy, lunacy, all revolutions are, until they happen. And then they are historical inevitabilities. And I think that's true. It's very hard to see history in the making. And we're in the middle of that movement as television and media goes more and more digital. Now, a little bit about Vubiquity to put in context what we're talking about in the cloud. So Vubiquity is the leading global provider of premium content services. And I know that's a lot of fancy buzzwords, but our solutions really put us squarely in the nexus between content owners on one side and service providers on the other. And we have products and solutions for both sides of the equation. We are, simply put, a media services company that relies heavily on the use of technology to deliver our products. And we offer a number of services, both a la carte and full turnkey, so from the largest providers to the smallest providers. They range from everything from content licensing, where we are, in the North American markets, we are the licensor of record on a big chunk of the content for every single one of the MVPDs, except for a few of the top 10, all throughout North America. And in the emerging markets, we're one of the top licensors, if not the top licensor of content in all categories from several of the major studios. But beyond content licensing that makes us somewhat unique, we also have a full suite of services that include programming, marketing support for stunts and barkers, etc., content management, metadata prep, localization, delivery, including and up to white-labeled B2B2C storefront solutions. And then on the back end of that, the royalties, processing, as well as analytics for a complete solution for both file-based and linear solutions. We've been at it for over 15 years, and we operate on more than 5 continents. So in 2013, we started investing and moving these same services to the cloud. And we dubbed that platform, not our products, but that platform, we called AnyView Cloud, and we started publicly talking about it at CES last year. And this is our next generation platform using all the technologies that you guys have been hearing about today. The Any part was an acknowledgement that it was going to be a full mix of both studio, episodic, and theatrical, as well as network-contributed content. And it was going to work on basically any device that could display video. And it was built on 3 basic tenets. First, we wanted to utilize the cloud infrastructure and the economies of scale to lower the cost of media processing and pass that through the value chain. This could be achieved a number of ways, but for example, spinning up and spinning down very large encoding farms and transcoding farms to process very large volumes of media is one way to do that. So we have seen a consistent geometric progression on the size of VOD libraries in the market and a shorter and shorter amount of time to deliver those services. So everything from 60 days to process a new release theatrical to free VOD that's turned around live to VOD captured and put back on the free VOD folders throughout the country in less than an hour and a half. So secondly, we knew that multi-screen TV solutions were going to require new methods of monetization. And also, it would create entirely new user experiences. Therefore, we wanted to create a very pluggable, plug-and-play ecosystem with vendors to take advantage of those new ecosystems coming out. We had no intention of building this all ourselves, because in the world today, if you saw the Amazon marketplace, you would realize that trying to compete on all those levels is an absolute recipe for failure. But we certainly saw the cloud itself as the best place to meet up and be able to trial those engines and integrate them faster and at lower risk. And finally, all of this was designed to run on a very large, a huge data backplane. Data powers everything in the cloud, right? Whether it is status reporting or orchestration, whether it's metadata that Jason was talking about, whether it's marketing material or consumer insights that power the monetization schemes I was just talking about, it's all driven by a single data backplane. And so that was key. The market, that presented some unique value propositions. Number one, we all know that consumers are increasingly wanting more content, but they want to consume it on every device, anytime, anywhere. And now they want it to work seamlessly, right? So they're no longer do they expect the 404 errors on the internet. They expect it to work on all devices. To Vubiquity, as I've already talked about, we generate greater efficiencies as far as the scale and the cost efficiencies. We gain the flexibility of an ecosystem play. And we also now are able to service with the same content really a lot of new distribution models. The cloud is all about multi-tenancy. And when you can enable large premium libraries that can enable that multi-tenancy, that's where you start to see some very interesting things. More and more so, we're seeing these large libraries where we can give back to our customers the efficiencies of multi-tenancy because they are able to now use an increasingly overlapping amount of content and not individually bear the cost of processing it themselves. And that has been the world we've been in. So for customers, not only do they get the cloud economics of lower capital investment, right? The SaaS type investment model ROI, but really provided in a CaaS, a content as a service type offering. But they also get a much faster time to market and a much lower upfront risk to bring new user experiences into the market. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Lower their cost, lower their risk, and lower the time it takes to get new offerings in the market. So it becomes easier. We're dropping the barriers, starting with the larger guys, but moving down the tier 2, tier 3 market so that everybody can get in the game at the right economics. By the end of this year, we will have taken the top 450 content providers and put it on this platform, and it will be servicing more than the top 500 service providers. So it is very real, and we are in the middle of a movement. Now, this is somewhat of a technical session, so I have to throw a little technology in there. Now, the cloud is a very nebulous thing, and our cloud is no exception. It is a hybrid cloud. So on the far right, we still have our private cloud. Why it is highly virtualized. It uses all the same technology that you would find in a virtualized public cloud. We still take a lot of physical ingest. We still get content on tape in some cases. We downlink more than 1,000 channels of live linear. And in many regards, because of security, we're getting pre-aired master content, and that we keep in our storage in our private wholly owned facilities. But that's all linked together, direct connected with a global 10 gig fiber ring that then uses the public clouds in a private way, really, but the hosting clouds. So in our case, we are using Amazon, many of the stuff we saw with the AWS presentation, and it's mostly EC2. It's mostly a pure compute cloud. So we're using our own proprietary software in the orchestration of this, but we allow the brain to live in the cloud. It's both the compute hosting, the orchestration, and the big data processing, because the evolutions there in the cloud are very fast to take advantage of. And we find, particularly, with Amazon, if you try to get to those new engines, the Series A, Series B startup companies, a lot of them are publishing first on AMIs and the Amazon cloud. So it becomes that public meet point on a global basis for us to try to hook up those new engines. And then as we get closer to the consumer, there are still a wide range of distribution clouds. Now, while we still privately connect through all the conditional access and we have Dockers that do all the ADI processing to pretty much every cable head end in North America and throughout Europe, more and more, increasingly so, we have to connect, and also, whether it's private or public origin, we leverage all of the major CDNs out there. And in some of our white label storefronts, we host them in places like Azure. So there are many clouds that are involved, all connected in a conditional access private backbone. So let me give you a use case example here. So we wanted to test the theory of all these economics and made sure that all the theory that I just threw out there actually worked in practical reality. And we chose the African market, the emerging market here, as a test bed to, if you offer something a little bit more stripped down, a little bit more consolidated, would it stimulate speed to market and growth of premium content, or is it just a new technology? And so on the orange here, you see English-speaking Africa. So we started with English-speaking Africa. And we went to the market and we offered a very standard offering. You all need to take basically the same premium content catalog. It ranges between 2,500 and 5,000 very premium titles of both episodic as well as theatrical, including first-run theatrical. But we acknowledge that there are many differences in your user experiences here, and particularly there's a lot of infrastructure challenges in Africa when it comes to different network speeds. So while you all need to take a similar offering, we're going to do a trick of late binding. So we will automatically take all of this content and pre-encode it. By the way, also pre-negotiate Pan-African rights with the studio. So we'll take the heavy lifting of getting the content for you, which is the first hurdle. We'll pre-encode that library into more than 50 bit rates, right? So late binding, where you keep it as fragmented HLS sitting out in a very large content library. You're starting to fill up the content lake. And on an affiliate by affiliate basis, they pick between 9 and 13 profiles that is for either their set-top boxes, their mobile devices, or their connected devices that are optimized for the speeds of their local areas. And towards the end of that process, you slap those profiles together on a per affiliate basis. You put on the DRM scheme for that area, and you publish it to that affiliate's library. And that is the trick of late binding. Now, what we've seen through that is some pretty good results as we were hoping. Number one, on average, it used to take between about 6 months for a new service offering to be put into the emerging markets. And that would take all the way from content acquisition and negotiating through the commercial offering. And on average, we saw those affiliates go to market to the consumers more than 6 months late on average. So a 1-year process to try to launch a new service offering. And unfortunately, in many times, you are very late to the market. With this model, what we saw is that year-long process, that 6-month process, has now dropped to less than 30 days. And in fact, we can do it in less than 10 days, a new commercial launch. The paperwork to file the security access for that content in those new countries really is the long pole in the tent. Last week alone, I saw some statistics. We added to this library 8 new series which had more than 175 episodes. A year ago, that would have taken us on average about 10 days per affiliate. So 5 days to prep the content and distribute it, and another 5 days to propagate through the affiliate ecosystem. Last week, that took 54 minutes. So you're starting to see how all these that getting the content to market at the right economic price point, even for the tier 3 markets, they will accept a bunch of standardization, but then can deeply personalize it to the consumer. Here is an example of one of our South African affiliates that recently launched, MTN. And as you can see, this is some seriously good content, right? Leading with Disney, a Disney package on the theatrical, and a lot of premium content on the episodic side. Now, I would love to take a bow here and say, okay, we're done. But even in the cloud, we see that innovation is outpacing interoperability, right? The cloud is moving at an amazing pace, letting us hook these engines up and doing it in a standard interoperable way for both metadata and video processing. But every time we think we have the problem licked, something new and different comes around that the consumer needs. And I'm sure at this NAB this year, what will we be talking a lot about? Electronic sell-through. Because there's been so electronic sell-through, right, is the ownership model, not renting, but buying digitally. And last year, there was lots of talks about things like ultraviolet. But there's an interesting trend here going on the EST front that's really creating a big reaction in the US and the North American MVPDs. And I know I'm in the OTT segment of the presentation, but I will loop back to over the top. But many people, I'm sure you've all seen this. So at the end of last year, Comcast started to release some of its numbers that they were getting around electronic sell-through, being able to buy through the X1 platform. And it was pretty amazing because we had really been getting all the statistics coming out of iTunes and Amazon as far as viewer experience and buy rates. But what Comcast was able to do in a very short amount of time was to capture 15% of a $1.5 billion market that is growing at more than a 30% growth rate. And in many cases, for some of the first-run theatrical, they actually outsold both iTunes and Amazon combined. Okay? So what's driving that, right? It's just not the need to buy a piece of content, especially through your set-top box, right? It's not where you think of as your primary marketplace. Well, what do we know? Number one, it was very interesting when you looked at the viewing behaviors of some of the recent MVPDs that have launched EST. The living room is still king, right? The 10-foot experience is absolutely, when given the opportunity to buy in these environments, 9 times out of 10, this is the device they're watching it on, your 55-inch plasma. And so you're starting to see less of a skewing towards iPads and other devices, which were the preferred device for people buying in a pure over-the-top retail situation. Now, what's also interesting is it is not so much about price and the convenience of the big screen, because if you look at certain statistics like return rate, how often does somebody buy this and actually watch it a second time? It's less than 10%. Meaning that it's not so much about owning it as is about access. So over the last 10 years in the VOD market, there has been a consistent shrinking of the gap between the box office theatrical window and the VOD window. There are a number of windows in between, with hospitality being one of them. But what we've seen is that increasingly shrink from basically a 60-day gap from the end of the theatrical to less than 2 to 4 weeks right now. Now, there is an absolute sweet spot coming out in electronic sell-through that happens to be the 2 weeks leading up to that. And so people are willing to pay a premium, regardless of the price, to access that content a couple weeks earlier. Okay, and so you're seeing now in both physical and in digital this opening for new windows. Now that itself provides that creates a number of very interesting technology challenges to the market to shift very, very quickly. And I thought Jason did an excellent job on the metadata side and Avails talking about that. But not only are the windows shifting, but the expression of the rights themselves are getting incredibly complicated. So the cloud is very, very good at handling rules around metadata, which is highly compressible. But not just, we talk about the video transcoding, but right now what's happening is long gone are the days where you had a simple rule of VOD plus 28 days is your holdback window. Right now, you're seeing in the contracts for electronic sell-through the need to have rules that are different by studio for which devices are enabled, in what format, at what price point, for how long. Now, in all of our EST deals, and we are for the most part through them, every single one of them says if you're going to sell on the set-top box, you must enable one or more other digital devices in order for the consumer to consume on. So think about that alone. Now you really need highly integrated solutions between the pure over-the-top digital devices and the legacy set-top boxes if this is going to work. And that in itself creates a big challenge. Now, if anybody is on the service provider side or watching this video, I'd say remain calm. This problem of metadata, there are solutions on the market. They're new, and this is a highly marketized roll-up of it. But basically, already you're basically leveraging the same video asset just earlier, but you're extending the metadata and the metadata handling to go to a number of environments. Now, I could show you about 50 different drawings to get to every connected device, but here, I've limited it to the set-top box here. So you're still going through the same legacy system on affiliates to a private Docker, which then does ADI commands to the VOD pumps and puts it up there and controls the conditional access. But what is very new and different is the metadata itself. So I've probably met with, in the last 6 months, with everybody that's doing anything in the MVPD space around EST right now. And the one thing I can tell you is not a single one of them is following the spec correctly, right? And basically, we've put out a very extended set of metadata offerings where we've extended the CableLabs 1.1 spec for metadata. We've extended the CableLabs 3.0 spec and the MovieLab spec. I mean, these are the base offerings to this community where we have appended or in some cases done multiple offerings on the same record where you now have the rental offering, but you've added in the electronic sell-through offering, so both the wholesale and suggested retail price. And you also have rent-to-own models, so it's not just a single offering. There is a lot of different offerings in the user experience. Oh, you've already rented this. Well, now you get a discount on that to buy it. Or you bought it in standard def. Well, now let me let you up-convert that to high definition. And there are many different flavors of merchandising of these rent-to-own and buy-to-own and these trade-up models. And with all of them, we've had to add in something that has historically not been in the specs, which is external IDs. Jason gave an excellent example of when the consumer accidentally bought the wrong version. And without an industry ID, at many ETC events, I've talked about and evangelized the fact that it's interesting that we don't have a ubiquitous, unique key on the most valuable content out there. But without some form of a third-party key or multiple keys, you run the very serious risk in an entitlement of a single user to a single asset that they see and then buy the wrong asset. And in an ownership model, that's a very bad idea. So by extending these and adding third-party keys, whether it's a Grace Note key or in many cases, ITER is starting to really permeate, or if you're doing other types of interoperable locker in the sky models like UV, you're required to then match those keys to the coordinator IDs and the asset IDs that are then published up in the UV coordinator. So all of those things are now offered in the market in this combined solution that you're starting to see for the tier 1 providers. That's what's powering the enablement of their launches that are out there. There are several other big technical challenges, though, that are not solved yet. And I'm sure you're going to be hearing a lot about that next month at NAB. And let me give you a couple of examples of that. All right, a couple of highlights. Number one is offer enablement. So it's one thing to pass the metadata through the acquisition chain that shows you how all these offers are enabled, but it's a very different thing to actually turn the buy button on your set-top box. So the North American market in particular has a lot of legacy QAM-based set-top boxes out there, and enabling the offer to those screens is a big barrier right now to mass adoption. There are solutions in the market, but they tend to be out there with the larger MSOs. And you're starting to see a lot of experimentation, a lot of cross-pollination with IP storefronts and buying off the screen but viewing through the set-top box, or faking out the premium VOD window that looks like an extended rental offering. And you're going to see a lot of these types of technical workarounds in 2015 as people try to get those offerings into market. but still have to deal with the legacy QAM environment that many households live in. And then there's my favorite issue, which is what I call the permanent storage issue. And for anybody that's owned, a giant DVD library at their house and probably has not watched 98% of it in the last decade, you can start to feel in the digital environment what of a problem this is going to be for most of the MVPDs out there. And let me put it to you a certain way. So right now, if you were to use the legacy QAM-based VOD pump infrastructure that's out there, most of those in their local DMAs can only hold in very expensive storage somewhere in the neighborhood of between 15 and 30,000 titles that's actively available to rent. And I'm being generous with that estimate. Right now in the US market, there is between 12,000 and 20,000 EST titles actively on the market in the cable and telco world, increasing every single month. So for the very large MSOs that can carry the capital balance sheet, they can get around this problem. And there are a number of solutions that are out in the market. They're just they're at a very high economic price point. So for the tier 2s, and God forbid the tier 3 market, they would immediately fill up their storage as soon as a consumer rented each one of those titles, because they essentially have ownership of that with a window that never ends, right? So Vubiquity has a long history of solving these types of problems in the VOD market. We're right now working with a dozen of the top providers on both the front end and in the middlewares in order to try to solve this problem. And I look forward to talking about this in the months to come as we roll those solutions out in the first half of this year, because it's a very exciting marketplace for the combined effort of both the integrated TV offering of both the set-top box, where most mainstream Americans are consuming content, and all of the connected devices that all the new generation consumers are consuming on the digital model. And I'll leave you with one last thought from the movie. I couldn't help myself. A cloud, like any ocean, is but a multitude of drops, right? And right now, as we fill up that content lake, there are a bunch of challenges to fix. And it is really one drop at a time that we're going to do that. But nevertheless, I hope I've shown you that many of those drops are now starting to fill up our cloud.
Doug, should I hand it straight to you? All right, who do we got? What kind of questions?
Come on. Okay, so I'm not as familiar with the Comcast service, but is that ultraviolet?
No, it's not. It's most content owners are really doing just straight EST. Ultraviolet was started by the studios and has some interesting economic advancements. Right now, the only large MSO that's doing ultraviolet is Verizon.
Okay.
Oh, Time Warner is starting to. Yeah. Right.
Oh, wait a second, Mike. So I was going to ask a question around permanent storage until you threw that slide up, which I thought was great. I guess my question is a rights management question. So when somebody on their set-top box purchases a title in that EST window,
right.
By the way, I've had like a dozen set-top boxes with hard drives that died on me. They're essentially buying the right to get a copy at any time. Is that basically what they're buying?
Yeah, it's digital ownership without ever owning the DVD, right? It's to replace the DVDs.
But it's not local, correct? Like you're talking about.
It does not have to be local. I mean, if you think about the old world of buying something, you would keep it on your local hard drive.
Right.
And in fact, it doesn't really have to be on the VOD. We don't want them to be on the VOD storage systems, which is very expensive storage, right? It's designed for high access, high speed throughput. What you really want is an entitlement locker, so a record that just matches the single subscriber to the single asset and is a proof of your record, and it follows you. even if you change service providers, right? And that's what UV really does, is it makes sure that it follows you on all platforms. Not every service provider is going to enable a UV-like feature, but they should enable this type of digital locker that is an entitlement locker. And then from there, really what you want to do is augment this other types of storage with cloud-based storage, origin storage delivered over a CDN, even if it's coming through your living room through a set-top box or any other connected device. That's how you consume it. So you use the same cloud economics, that same multi-tenancy giant library of shared assets to basically entitle what's called the locker access streaming provider, right? The default LASP of this giant library. Or else you're right back in the boat where basically every affiliate has to bear the storage cost of every single piece of content ever made. And that's a non-starter.
So do you think the consumer understands that ownership has been redefined as access rights in this use model?
I think that we want to make sure the user doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've failed if the user has to worry about that. And I think in the early days of UV, that was the big hiccup. You would buy it from one retailer, and then you'd try to play it on a well-known streaming provider, and it would blow up. And suddenly you realize that maybe I don't actually own this. And that's just technology falling down because the user owns it. You know, it's our goal as an industry to make sure that you just don't care, right? That when you want to provide, you can, on many devices, you can find your library very easily, and you can play it wherever you are.
With an unlimited window.
I mean, really,
Basically.
this is
It's rental
EST
with
is
an
the
unlimited
early opening to really the movement to universal VOD. And again, not Universal Studios, but universally everything becoming video on demand, right, that we've been talking about. EST is an accelerant of that model because both the content owners and the service providers are pushing heavy for that new vertical, given its price points and given its acceleration. But the same technology is going to be leveraged to enable look back and then stacking rights, multi-season stacking rights, to really the point where all content, and several people have talked about even news gathering and highly perishable content being suddenly and instantly available in the cloud. So really everything becomes VOD at that point. EST is just one very specific model in universal VOD.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you so much.